In America, people have a calendar for everything. Zoom meetings, piano lessons, oil changes, flu shots. Even the day Target has your favorite coffee creamer on sale. And of course, the biannual checkup where your doctor prints out a green-colored chart and says you're doing just fine. But there's one thing that never makes it onto the calendar. Death. It doesn't send a heads-up email, no phone alert, no notification from your Fitbit. It doesn't wait for you to finish your errands or for the leaves to fully turn gold in the suburbs. It just arrives. No reason, no apology. That morning, Tom, 66 years old, had just come back from Starbucks. He greeted the new neighbor, dropped his coffee bag on the kitchen counter, checked the stock market, looked at the washing machine, and headed down to the garage to tweak something in the old van he swore he'd restore one day. 20 minutes later, they found him on the cold cement floor. His phone was still buzzing with messages. Did you eat? Hop on Zoom later? There was no farewell, only silence. There's a uniquely American illusion that if you eat clean, run in the mornings, pay your bills on time, and keep your cholesterol in check, you'll live longer. That science will save you. That tech will alert you before anything goes wrong. But the truth is, death doesn't need a GPS. It doesn't wait for mistakes. It comes when it's ready. And the cruel part? Sometimes your body knows it's coming, knows before the smartwatch, before the MRI. But the signs don't scream. They whisper. You sleep longer. You eat less. You fall silent in conversations you used to laugh in. You stop wanting to go outside. The lights at Publix feel brighter, more aggressive. You forget the names of songs you once loved. These are not in the wellness books. But those who've watched someone quietly disappear, they understand. They know there's a kind of retreat, not of the body, but from the inside, an absence before the leaving. And so if death can slip through the cracks of a Missouri afternoon, between the dishwasher cycle and the driveway routine, we must ask a different kind of question. Not how do I avoid it, but rather how will I know when it's near? Not to fear it, but to recognize it, to prepare, not in panic, but in presence. A true Stoic way, we don't offer comfort for comfort's sake. We offer clarity, perspective rooted in timeless Stoic wisdom. Because Marcus Aurelius wasn't trying to escape death. He was trying to live as if it could come today. So stay with us, not to count the hours, but to understand their weight. These are the clearest signs that the end may be approaching, not as superstition, but as the quiet language of the body and soul. Let's begin. Sign 1. It starts in the quiet hours. The first cracks appear not in daylight, but in how the night feels. Something quiet begins to go wrong with sleep, not like insomnia, but like a clock losing time. It doesn't start with pain. It starts with a shift, barely noticeable, like a page in a novel turning itself, like the silence between two distant sirens. You still brush your teeth. You still check your email. You still set the alarm for 7:00 a.m., but something in your sleep breaks. At first, you tell yourself it's stress, the taxes, the neighbor's barking dog, that Netflix show you probably shouldn't have binged until 2 a.m. But this isn't that. This is different. You sleep for 13 hours straight and wake up more exhausted than when you went to bed. Or worse, you lie there for 8 hours, unmoving, eyes closed, and never actually fall asleep. It's as if your body no longer knows the rhythm, like it forgot the lullaby it sang you every night for decades. You sit in bed at 3:17 a.m., fully awake, staring at the ceiling. The fan spins, the moon shifts, and you feel outside of something, outside of yourself. Later that day, you nap twice, not because you want to, because you collapse. And when people ask if you're okay, you smile, say, just tired. But you know that's not the truth, not really. The nights stop feeling like rest. They become a landscape, empty, long, and unfamiliar. Like driving through Nebraska at midnight. Everything looks the same, but none of it is home. This isn't insomnia, it's something older, something quieter, something that knows the finish line is somewhere nearby, though still out of sight. It doesn't come with visions or voices. It comes with timing, with subtle betrayal, Your body no longer aligns with the world's clock, and you start to drift away from routine, from daylight, from the version of yourself that used to function like a schedule, and into a space where time feels strange, like a room without walls. The truth is, most people don't notice this shift in themselves. It's family who sees it first. They whisper things like, "She's been sleeping a lot lately. He didn't show up for breakfast club again. She missed her soap opera. She never misses it." Because the descent into this kind of sleep, or the failure of it, isn't loud. It's not some dramatic collapse. It's a gentle unraveling. And it's the body's first soft confession. I'm getting ready to go. The story of Eleanor's porch. Eleanor, a retired school teacher, once lived by order and habit. Her unraveling sleep becomes the first visible sign that something deeper is shifting. Eleanor hadn't missed a sunrise in nearly 20 years. She was the kind of woman who made her bed with hospital corners, kept her coffee in labeled tins, and folded grocery bags neatly into squares. Even her porch swing moved in rhythm, creaking once every 3 seconds, like the beat of a quiet hymn. Retired school teacher, widow, lived in Burlington, Vermont, where the maple leaves turned fire orange in October, and the winters made the air feel like glass. For decades, Eleanor's life ran on rails. Up at 6:15, oatmeal at 6:45, daily walk with her rescue dog Milo at precisely 7:10, rain or shine, church on Sundays, library Tuesdays, family Zoom call Fridays. There was comfort in her ritual, a kind of defense against time, until the day she missed breakfast. Then it happened again. Then she didn't wake up until noon. Her daughter thought it was the cold snap. Her pastor said she should try vitamin D. Even Eleanor joked, "Guess I'm just catching up on all the sleep I lost in 1984. But she knew better. The naps became longer. Then irregular, then reversed. She began staying up all night, pacing the hardwood floor in her socks, sitting on the porch wrapped in a blanket, whispering aloud to no one in particular. "I don't feel tired, I feel floating," she told her daughter once. She stopped keeping her planner, stopped checking the mail. Milo died in his sleep one Thursday, and she didn't replace him. Her porch swing went still, but it wasn't depression. It wasn't dementia either. There was no confusion in her eyes, only a deep and knowing calm, the kind that unnerves you because it's so quiet. One evening, her daughter came by to drop off groceries. She found Eleanor on the porch in her favorite cardigan, eyes half closed, staring at the trees like they were speaking a language she almost remembered. "I keep waking up between dreams," she said, voice flat, like my soul wants to stretch its legs. That was 3 weeks before she died, peacefully, in sleep, no struggle, no final breath drawn through clenched teeth, just a soft undoing. And in her journal, left open on the kitchen table, was a single line written in clean, deliberate script. "Night doesn't frighten me anymore. It feels like home now." Biology has a plan too. Summary: sleep disturbances near the end of life aren't random. They are part of the body's quiet, organized retreat. The body prioritizes survival and begins shutting down what's no longer essential. We like to think of the body as chaotic, a mess of wires and fluids and unpredictable variables. But when death begins to approach, something strange happens. It gets organized. You wouldn't notice it at first. But deep beneath the layers of skin and breath and muscle, the body begins to make decisions, not in panic, not in fear, but with a kind of ancient biological wisdom. It knows the power is running low, so it begins to conserve. Imagine a city losing power one neighborhood at a time. First go the art museums, then the libraries, then the parks. All resources are rerouted to keep the hospitals, the water supply, the emergency lines running. That's what the body does. And one of the first systems to dim? Sleep. Not because it's unimportant, but because it's too closely tied to energy distribution, memory processing, emotional regulation, all of which are luxuries when the body is preparing to shut down. You may sleep too much or not at all. The cycle breaks. The circadian rhythm begins to fray. Melatonin gets confused. The brain's signaling flickers like a weak radio. At 2 a.m., you're wide awake for no reason. At noon, you drift off mid-conversation. Your dreams become strange, sometimes vivid, sometimes non-existent. Food tastes dull. Music irritates. The body, which once reached outward, now turns inward, like a turtle pulling into its shell. Doctors have a term for it, pre-active phase, but it sounds too clinical, too cold for what's really happening. Because this isn't just physiology, it's a kind of emotional migration. You aren't withdrawing from life because you've given up. You're withdrawing because your body is quietly asking, do we need this anymore? Do we need this meeting, this calendar, this news cycle, this pretense of being busy? The answer, more and more, is no. And so the body releases, gently, not all at once, but in a whisper. Sleep becomes fractured because you are no longer running on the world's schedule. You are on another clock now, one the world can't see, a countdown not to terror, but to stillness. And what's most mysterious of all? Sometimes this disruption is the most merciful thing the body can offer. Because in those restless nights and quiet naps, there's space to reflect, to settle accounts, to say what was never said. Not everyone gets that chance. Some leave in an instant, mid-sentence, mid-laugh. But if your body gives you this early signal, this shattering of sleep, it might be its way of saying you have time. Not much, but enough. What the Stoics understood. Summary. For the Stoics, the breakdown of sleep isn't just biology, it's philosophy in motion. A reminder to reconcile, release, and recenter before the final stillness arrives. The Stoics spent their lives preparing for the thing we spend ours avoiding. They didn't glamorize death, they didn't chase it, but they didn't pretend it wouldn't come either. Marcus Aurelius, emperor and philosopher, wrote by candlelight in the dead of night, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." He wasn't being dramatic. He was being precise. To live fully, he believed, you had to live aware that no moment was promised, that no argument was worth stretching into tomorrow, that no love should be withheld, and that sleep, especially disrupted sleep, might not be a medical issue, but a moral invitation. When your sleep breaks down, your distractions go with it. Your guard drops. You stop pretending. You stop postponing the apology. You stop delaying the forgiveness. You stop expecting the world to explain itself to you, because your body is doing what the Stoics practice daily. Letting go of control, of timing, of ego, and slowly, almost respectfully, returning to stillness. In that way, disturbed sleep isn't just a symptom, it's a mirror. It asks, are you carrying things you don't need anymore? Regrets you haven't named? People you haven't thanked? Have you said what matters? Have you made peace with the part of you that's always been afraid? There is no sedative for a soul at war with itself. But there is something better than sleep. There is alignment. The Stoics believed peace wasn't something you waited for. It was something you practiced daily, painfully, beautifully, in traffic, in arguments, in the still 3 and 12 a.m. moments when sleep refuses to come and your thoughts won't quiet. That's where philosophy begins, not in lectures, but in the long night. So when your sleep starts to fray, don't panic. Listen. It may not be a warning, it may be a summons to a quieter, wiser way of living. Because those who learn how to rest, truly rest, often learn how to leave with dignity. And that, the Stoics would say, is the first real lesson in dying well. From sleep to appetite, from rest to nourishment, how the body lets go, layer by layer. So when sleep begins to break, not from insomnia, but from something older, deeper, what comes next? What happens when rest no longer restores you? When time loses structure and your days blur like watercolor? Your body begins the next retreat. This time not into silence, but into emptiness. The plate stays full, the coffee grows cold, your favorite meals no longer taste like memory, and the people around you start to notice you're not hungry anymore, not just for food, but for presence, for engagement, for the textures of living. That's where we go next. Because here at True Stoic Way, we follow the signs, not to fear them, but to understand them. And the second sign, death may be approaching, it starts in the mouth, but ends in the soul. Sign 2, the appetite that isn't coming back. Sudden, effortless weight loss and a fading appetite seem benign, but often signal the body has stopped prioritizing digestion, taste, and energy intake. It begins innocently enough. You skip breakfast, then lunch feels like a chore. Dinner becomes a few forkfuls, mostly out of politeness. At first, you don't think much of it. You tell yourself it's the weather, or age, or stress. Maybe the seasoning's off. Maybe your fridge is just uninspiring. But soon, even the foods you once craved, the ones that lit up your childhood, that tasted like holidays and laughter and memory, start to feel muted. You stare at your plate, fork suspended, and wonder when eating became a transaction rather than a joy. People compliment the weight loss. You look great. You must be doing something right. And you smile, because it's easier than explaining the truth. The truth is, you're not doing anything. You're not dieting. You're not exercising. You're not trying. The pounds fall away anyway. Your belt tightens, your rings spin loosely, your reflection sharpens in the mirror, but you feel less present, not more. What's happening is simple, though hard to admit. Your body is no longer trying to thrive. It's managing, prioritizing, redirecting energy away from digestion, one of the most resource-heavy tasks we perform, and saving it for the essentials, the heart, the lungs, the brain. Digestion in this phase is considered optional, taste, unnecessary, pleasure, irrelevant. The hunger doesn't return, not with your favorite meals, not with fancy restaurants, not even with love. Food begins to feel like a foreign language you no longer speak fluently. You chew because people are watching. You swallow, but not with desire, only duty. And the worst part, no one tells you this is a sign. No one warns you that when the appetite disappears without warning, it's not a victory, it's a whisper, a gentle retreat, a message the body is sending quietly. We are preparing not to die tomorrow, but to stop pretending you are still in the race. And if you listen closely, you'll notice that this is not just a physical change, it's emotional, it's existential. You're not just losing weight, you're losing presence. One plate at a time, Linda's lemon pie. A woman known for cooking her whole life suddenly can't taste her favorite pie. A soft heartbreak. Her story reveals the emotional layer of appetite fading. Linda had been the kind of woman who cooked without recipes. She didn't measure. She felt. 1 pinch of nutmeg meant my son is home. 2 teaspoons of cinnamon meant I miss my mother. Food wasn't nourishment. It was memory made warm. And for Linda, nothing said home like her lemon pie. Tangy, sharp, just the right balance of sweet and bite. She made it every Christmas, every birthday, every time a neighbor had surgery or a baby or a bad breakup. It wasn't just a dessert, it was a signature, a poem in sugar and citrus. So when she made it one spring afternoon and took the first bite and tasted nothing, not even dullness, just absence, she froze. She thought maybe the lemons were old, maybe the oven was too hot, maybe she'd made a mistake, so she made another and another. Each time the crust was perfect, the texture flawless, but still nothing. Her daughter noticed she wasn't eating much. Linda waved her off, just not hungry lately. But something had broken, something sacred. In the weeks that followed, Linda stopped baking. She watched the Food Network with the volume off. She rearranged her spice rack out of habit but never used it. She sat at the table during Sunday dinners like a guest in someone else's house. She told her granddaughter once, "It's like my mouth forgot how to feel joy." The doctor ran tests, said she was fine, blood pressure normal, heart steady, lungs clear. But Linda knew something deeper was happening. Her body wasn't asking for nourishment anymore. It was releasing the ritual. No more cooking, no more seasoning, no more secret flavors passed through 3 generations. And the hardest part? No one else noticed. To them, it was a phase, a minor dip in appetite, a sign of aging. But Linda understood. This wasn't about food, it was about presence, and how hers was beginning to fade. That spring would be her last, and she knew it. Not because of pain, not because of diagnosis, but because when she closed her eyes, she could no longer remember the exact taste of lemon. And to Linda, that was the body's way of saying, "You've fed others long enough, now rest." Biology's quiet prioritization. The science behind this loss, how metabolism, taste receptors, and brain chemistry shift when the body begins pulling resources inward. The body is not sentimental. It does not cling. It does not argue. It simply adapts, quietly, efficiently. When death draws near, it doesn't panic. It reorganizes. What used to be essential, digestion, flavor, pleasure, becomes optional. And so like a captain in a storm, the body starts closing doors to conserve power. The digestive system is one of the first to dim. Why? Because digestion is expensive. It takes enormous energy to break down food, extract nutrients, run the chemical factories of metabolism. Near the end, the body knows it doesn't have the time or energy for luxury, so it starts making cuts. Food begins to taste off. Sweet turns bitter. Savory becomes bland. Even water can taste metallic. The salivary glands slow. The gut motility decreases. The stomach stops grumbling. But perhaps the most poetic shift happens in the brain. The hypothalamus, which regulates hunger, begins to downregulate. Dopamine release fades. Food no longer feels like comfort. It feels like obligation. And so appetite disappears. Not because you're sick, but because the body has chosen its final strategy: preserve the core. Keep the brain alert. Keep the heart beating. Keep the lungs expanding. Everything else, digestion, sexual function, immune system, even emotional highs and lows, gets turned down. It's not cruel, it's brilliant. A kind of built-in hospice programmed not by medicine, but by evolution itself. Still, for those watching, it's terrifying. To see a loved one push away food they once adored, to offer a spoonful of their favorite soup and have them smile politely but shake their head, feels like rejection. But it's not. It's just the body saying, we're done prioritizing survival. Now we're focusing on release. It may look like fading, it may look like weakness, but inside what's happening is a return to stillness, to simplicity, to essential function only. And in that stillness, there can be peace. If you understand what you're seeing, you won't try to force one more bite. You'll sit with them. Maybe hold their hand. Maybe ask about the first meal they ever loved. And listen, because appetite is leaving, but their story isn't gone yet. The Stoic meaning of letting go. Stoicism sees the loss of appetite not as a defeat, but as a moment of inward realignment, a return to essence, a call to shed illusions of identity and live for a while as we truly are. The Stoics were never afraid of emptiness. In fact, they prepared for it, trained for it, welcomed it, not as punishment, but as purification. To lose appetite, for them, wasn't weakness, it was truth. When your hunger fades, not just for food, but for busyness, for control, for significance, you are arriving at something rare, clarity stripped of illusion. Seneca once wrote, "What need is there to weep over parts of life? The whole of it calls for tears." But he didn't mean that bitterly. He meant it as a kind of honesty. Life is full of loss, loss of taste, loss of memory, loss of ritual. But if we accept these losses not with desperation, but with discipline, we begin to see that each loss is also a gift, a chance to let go of the false. When you no longer crave food, you are not broken. You are becoming lighter. When you push away the plate, you are not giving up. You are stepping inward into a quieter, more essential space. Identity thins, attachment softens. What once seemed urgent becomes silent. This is what the Stoics understood, that death is not the opposite of life. It is part of it. To approach it with presence, with open eyes, and an unburdened heart is to die not tragically, but honorably. You don't need to fake hunger in your final weeks. You don't need to pretend to be who you were. If you are called to stillness, go there. If food tastes empty, release it. If the world begins to blur around the edges, soften with it. Because the appetite that vanishes near the end is not stealing life from you. It is handing you the quiet. The same quiet Marcus Aurelius wrote about in his final days. The kind that doesn't need applause or explanation. Only acceptance. So if someone you love no longer eats, don't fear, don't force. Sit with them in the sacredness of that silence. You are not losing them. You are walking them home. So what happens when the body stops asking for food? When taste no longer anchors us and appetite no longer tethers us to ritual? The body begins to pull away, quietly. But soon the mind follows. The world, once full of color and chatter, begins to feel distant, muted, faint. You stop planning, you stop insisting, you stop expecting anything at all. This isn't depression, it isn't confusion. It's something older than diagnosis, a kind of natural retreat from the noise of the living world. And that's where we go next. Because here at True Stoic Way, we don't just observe the end of life from the outside. We walk through it from the inside. Not to chase meaning, but to sit with it, to let it reveal itself. So if you haven't yet, subscribe and stay with us as we explore the next sign, the withdrawing mind. Sign 3, the fade that isn't confusion. Early signs of mental detachment are often misread as apathy or dementia, but they reflect something deeper, a natural psychological retreat. It starts with small absences, a forgotten appointment, a checkbook left open on the kitchen counter, a phone call left unanswered, not because it was missed, but because it suddenly felt unnecessary. At first, these things look like slip-ups, like the early tremors of memory loss, like a brain misfiring. But look closer. What if it's not confusion? What if it's something else? What if it's a choice the mind is quietly making to let go of things it no longer needs to carry? This is the kind of withdrawal most people don't understand. It doesn't come with trembling hands or hospital bracelets. It comes with a kind of strange, elegant calm. The person who once organized the family calendar now shrugs when dates are mentioned. The woman who once argued passionately about politics now simply smiles, as if she's watching a show she no longer feels part of. The fade isn't chaotic, it's graceful, which makes it harder to name. You might hear someone say, she's been distant lately, or he's just not himself anymore. But they are themselves, just a new version, one that is turning inward, like a tree drawing sap back to the trunk before winter. This mental shift isn't about forgetting, it's about releasing. Releasing control, releasing urgency, releasing the illusion that everything still needs your input. There's no panic in their eyes, just a kind of quiet, a presence that has stopped chasing and begun observing. And though it can be hard for family to watch someone let go of their favorite shows or stop talking about next year's vacation or skip the Sunday crossword, this isn't resignation, it's realignment. The mind is no longer looking forward, it's looking inward, sorting, softening, settling. It is not a glitch in the system. It is the system doing exactly what it was designed to do. And if you can learn to see it, not as decline, but as design, you'll begin to understand that this fade isn't the end. It's the beginning of a very different kind of awareness. Raymond and the unpaid bills. A man once obsessed with control lets go of his routines, finances, and future talk. His shift reveals the strange calm of internal surrender. Raymond used to balance his checkbook to the penny every Monday, 3 p.m., rain, shine, or family crisis. He kept every receipt in color-coded envelopes, had spreadsheets for birthdays, oil changes, and lawn treatments. He tracked the interest rates on his kids' student loans, even after they'd paid them off. Control wasn't just his habit, it was his language, his armor. So when his daughter found 3 unpaid utility bills sitting unopened on his desk, she froze. She assumed the worst. Dementia, a stroke, something neurological. How else could a man like Raymond simply forget? But it wasn't forgetting. He was still sharp. He could still recite the cable account number by heart. He just didn't care anymore. When asked about the bills, he smiled. They'll get paid or they won't. And that smile wasn't confusion. It was release. The same week he stopped arguing about the thermostat, stopped telling the grandkids not to slam the door, stopped complaining about the garbage cans not being rolled in straight. He started sitting on the back porch more, watching squirrels, staring at the trees like they were trying to tell him something he almost remembered. He no longer planned for Thanksgiving, didn't mention renewing the insurance policy, stopped reminding his wife to rotate the pantry stock, and for the first time in years, he let someone else drive. His family whispered, "He's slowing down. He's slipping." But Raymond wasn't slipping. He was letting go. The spreadsheet man had come to terms with something deeper than numbers, that not everything in life can be balanced, that some columns never reconcile, and that the real cost of control is never feeling peace. What he was doing, was reordering his life from the inside out. No more data, no more deadlines, no more pretending that the future could be managed into submission. He was no longer rehearsing for tomorrow. He was showing up for today. And if you look closely, not at what he dropped, but what he'd chosen, you'd see it wasn't resignation. It was wisdom, a final kind, the brain's quiet exit strategy. A soft dive into the neuroscience behind reduced social and emotional engagement, why the brain stops reacting to noise, urgency, and even regret. The brain doesn't panic when death approaches. It simplifies. In those final months, weeks, or days, its goal is not to think faster or more. Its goal is to let go, but not randomly. The retreat is precise, purposeful. Certain neural pathways begin to dim. The amygdala, the part of the brain that registers threat and fear, quiets down. The frontal cortex, the part that worries, plans, analyzes, relaxes its grip. And social noise, the chatter of the world, the pressure to reply, to fix, to perform, it fades. Your mind begins to respond less to what's expected and more to what's essential. For some, this means fewer words, not because they can't speak, but because they no longer feel the need to. For others, it means pulling away from conflict, even from long-held grudges, because the adrenaline that once made a fight feel meaningful just isn't there anymore. This isn't depression, it's not dissociation, it's realignment. The brain, like the body, begins pulling energy inward, away from the external stage toward the quiet theater of memory and emotion. Old memories surface, often with startling clarity, long-forgotten smells, songs, names from elementary school. This is because the hippocampus, your brain's memory center, begins looping inward. It no longer gathers new input. It replays, reviews, reconciles. Some call this confusion, but often it's more like reflection. And in rare moments, something remarkable happens. A person who's been foggy for weeks suddenly becomes lucid, clear, present, awake. They say things that matter. Ask questions they've never asked. Apologize. Bless. Laugh. This phenomenon, known in medicine as terminal lucidity, has no full explanation. It's not a glitch. It's not a miracle. It's the brain's final gift, a moment of completion, and then it begins its exit. Not with alarms, but with grace. The noise dulls. The loop stops spinning. The curtain begins to fall, quietly and in perfect timing. So if someone you love stops making small talk or drops the thread of casual life, don't panic. Their mind isn't breaking. It's bowing out with elegance, the Stoic art of disappearance. From Marcus Aurelius to Epictetus, Stoicism teaches that letting go of worldly attachments is not defeat. It is discipline. The mind's retreat is preparation, not withdrawal. The Stoics never sought immortality. They sought clarity. To them, death wasn't failure. It was the final frontier of freedom. Freedom from illusion, from attachment, from the noise of needing to be known. So when the mind begins to withdraw, not from pain but from performance, The Stoics would not mourn that change. They would bow to it. Epictetus taught that what is beyond our control is not our concern. In what is within our control, our response, our presence, our dignity. So when someone begins to fade mentally, emotionally, socially, what if they are not falling apart? What if they are finally doing what the Stoics practiced every day? Detaching from vanity, from ego, from the idea that they must always be on. They stop planning because they no longer believe tomorrow is promised. They stop debating because they have learned that silence often says more. They stop explaining, defending, proving, because peace needs no witnesses. In this quiet disappearance, there is no breakdown. There is discipline. To live as if you are already leaving is not despair, it is preparation. Marcus Aurelius didn't teach us to fear the retreat of the mind. He taught us to expect it, to meet it like an old friend, to recognize it not as forgetting the world, but as returning to the self. So when someone you love begins to grow quiet, to drift, to speak less, don't try to pull them back. Sit with them. Be still with them. Because what they are doing at that moment is something sacred. They are disappearing well. And the Stoics would say, there is no more honorable exit than that. So when the mind grows quiet, not in defeat but in clarity, what comes next? What happens when even thought begins to fade? When the need to speak, to argue, to explain, simply vanishes? The body begins its final monologue. Not in words, but in skin, in breath, in rhythm. This is not about illness, not about diagnosis. It's about the body turning inward for the very last time. And the signs are undeniable, even if no one wants to name them. Cold hands, marbled legs, breath that starts and stops like the tide, color draining slowly from the places we once touched with warmth. This is the body's last communication, a quiet goodbye written in biology, and it's what we explore next. At True Stoic Way, we don't flinch from this moment. We walk toward it, because to witness the body's truth, without panic, without denial, is to stand at the very edge of wisdom. If you haven't yet, subscribe, because understanding the end is the only way to truly live before it. Now let's listen to the body one last time. Sign 4, the cold in the hands. As circulation slows, the hands and feet become cold, often the first unmistakable physical sign that the body is beginning its final transition. It usually starts in the fingers. You go to hold their hand, and it's cool. Cooler than yesterday, cooler than it should be. At first you brush it off. The room's a little chilly, someone says. You tuck an extra blanket around them, bring a space heater closer, offer warm tea, but it doesn't help. The cold doesn't leave. It deepens. And then you notice the toes, pale, then purple, then laced with patterns, like a leaf just before it falls. This is not poor circulation, not dehydration, not a fixable problem. This is the body making a decision. Blood is being rerouted, not by panic, but by wisdom. In the final days, even hours, the body prioritizes. It sends oxygen to the brain, to the heart, to the lungs. And what it no longer serves, it releases. The extremities go cold. The warmth retreats to the core. Not because the body is breaking, but because it is letting go of everything it no longer needs to hold. And the hands, the same hands that once signed papers, tied shoelaces, carried children, stirred soup, wiped tears, are the first to say goodbye. Families often panic, call doctors, add blankets, but nothing changes. Because this isn't about comfort, it's about completion. The skin begins to pale, the nails lose their pink. The palms, once soft with warmth, feel distant, thin, like paper left in the sun too long. And still the person is here, still breathing, still sometimes whispering, but the body is speaking too, in silence. And what it's saying is not cruel, it is honest, and we are nearing the threshold. To recognize that, to name it without fear, is not to give up. It is to bear witness with clarity, with hands of your own, still warm, wrapped gently around the ones already halfway gone, the breathing that stutters, The breathing pattern becomes erratic, deep, then shallow, then silent. Though it may seem frightening, this is the body's natural rhythm winding down. It doesn't sound like the movies. There's no final gasp, no poetic sigh, no cue for the music to swell. Instead, there's a pause, a breath, then nothing. 5 seconds, 10, sometimes 15. Then suddenly another breath, deep, unexpected, almost like surprise. This is not a malfunction. This is not pain, it is the body entering its final cadence. Doctors call it Cheney-Stokes respiration, a pattern of breathing where the inhale and exhale stretch farther apart, growing softer, shallower, slower. But to the untrained ear, it sounds like dying, and it is, but not violently, not destructively. It is the body letting rhythm go. The brain's respiratory center, normally so precise, so controlling, begins to release its grip, like a conductor stepping off the podium, allowing the instruments to play themselves out. And in that space between breaths, time changes. The room feels quieter, the seconds stretch, people lean forward. Is this it? But no, another breath comes, as if from nowhere, as if the body itself isn't quite ready to leave. And yet, it is rehearsing. Each breath a little less urgent, each pause a little longer, each return softer, until the space between no longer closes. For loved ones, this is the most terrifying part. The waiting, the wondering, the rhythm that cannot be predicted. But if you listen closely, beneath the fear, you'll hear something else. Peace. This is not struggle, not a drowning, not a choking. It is a tide, ebbing, receding, returning once or twice more before finally going out. There may be a rattle, a sound from the throat that startles, but it isn't pain. It's the body no longer wasting energy on clearing airways. The effort is over. What remains is surrender. And in that surrender, if you can be still, you'll realize the stuttered breath isn't a failure. It is a letting go done in rhythm, in order, in grace. The skin's quiet message. As circulation slows further, the skin changes, color fades, marbling appears. The body is no longer focused on appearance or symmetry, it is closing. The skin tells a story even when the mouth can't. It's the final page, thin, exposed, quiet. And near the end, that story begins to change. Colors fade. Not suddenly, but like watercolor left in the rain. Fingers that once flushed with heat go pale. Toes turn bluish, then purple. Lips lose their pink. And across the legs, arms, even the back, modeling appears. Swirls, webs, fractal-like patterns that creep up like vines. To the unknowing, it's frightening. But to those who've walked this road before, it's simply the body drawing inward. Circulation slows. Blood no longer rushes to the surface. The warmth we wear like identity retreats, because the body is conserving, not out of fear, but out of focus. The skin, once vibrant, is no longer a priority. The body doesn't need to look alive. It just needs to finish the work of dying well. Sometimes the skin feels waxy, sometimes it bruises without cause. Sometimes it looks translucent, as if the veil between body and soul has thinned. Families notice. Her hands look strange. His legs are discolored. Should we call someone? But there's no emergency, no cure, no reversal. This is not illness, this is timing. And when we stop trying to fix it, when we sit beside the person, hold their marbled hand, stroke the coolness without recoil, we honor something ancient. Because even now, the body is communicating. Not with pain, not with complaint, just with skin. And what it says is simple. I'm almost gone, and that's okay. The beauty in the system shutting down. The body doesn't fail near the end, it completes. Everything shuts down in perfect sequence, like lights dimming on a stage. There is profound design in the closing of life. The body never really crashes. It closes, softly, system by system, like stage lights dimming one by one until the theater goes still. It begins with hunger, then sleep, then speech, then breath, and finally by bang, silence. But here's what most people don't realize. This isn't collapse. It's choreography. Each part of you, organs, glands, muscles, skin, knows when to stop, knows how to bow out without chaos. The kidneys stop filtering. The liver stops detoxifying. The intestines stop absorbing. The eyes no longer track. But nothing explodes. Nothing screams. Everything just winds down. Not because the body is broken, but because it is complete. It has done its work, carried you through heartbreak, held your children, kept time with the ticking of clocks and the pounding of dance floors and the racing of deadlines. Now it returns what it borrowed. The calcium, the water, the breath, all of it released, returned. And as the lungs settle, as the skin quiets, as the pulse moves from steady to scattered to gone, there is no shame in that rhythm, only symmetry. This isn't failure, it's fulfillment. Like a symphony that knows exactly when to end. And when it does, what's left is not tragedy, it's presence. The soft weight of a hand still held. The final exhale, still warm. The last flicker of skin, still human. The Stoics understood this. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily, soon you will have forgotten everything. Soon everything will have forgotten you. Not to mourn it, but to meet it with peace, because when the body shuts down, it isn't disappearing. It's completing its design. And your only task is to be there as it does, to witness, not with fear, but with reverence. So when the skin quiets, the breath slows, the hands fall still, what remains? When the systems close like a book and the world begins to blur, is there anything left that still listens? Yes, one thing. The body lets go of appetite, motion, even sight. But it holds on to sound. Until the very end, the ears remain open. Not to noise, but to something more sacred. Final words, last voices. The truth beneath silence. What if the dying can still hear you, even when their eyes no longer open? What if the most important thing you'll ever say is said after you think they've already gone? That's where we go next. Because a true Stoic way, we believe dying well isn't just about being seen. It's about being heard. And hearing, even at the end, might be the soul's final act of love. Sign 5. What the dying still hear. Long after sight and speech have faded, hearing remains. This final sense becomes the quiet bridge between the living and the departing. The room is quiet now. The machines have slowed. The voice that once filled the air, joking, asking, remembering, is gone. But they're still here, still breathing, still with you, and most importantly, still listening. Science confirms what intuition has always whispered. Hearing is the last to go. Long after the eyes stop tracking, after the mouth no longer moves, after even touch has lost its signal, the ears remain. Not for long, but long enough to hear a whispered thank you, a trembled I forgive you, a brave it's okay to let go, long enough for music, for prayer, for laughter that breaks mid-sentence into tears. The dying don't respond. They don't squeeze your hand. They don't look at you with recognition. But something shifts, a softening in the brow, a flutter in the throat, a breath that holds as if listening. And sometimes they wait. They wait for a voice, for one person to arrive, for one sentence to be said. There's a reason some people pass right after someone whispers, you can go. The mind may be silent, the body may be still, but the soul through the ear is still receiving. And what you say in those moments may be what they take with them as their final echo. So say it even if it breaks you, even if your voice shakes, even if they said it first 100 times and you never said it back. Say it now, because now they can still hear you. Eleanor's song. A grandmother lies unresponsive, eyes closed, breath slow. But when her granddaughter sings an old song, something stirs, because even at the end, hearing remains. Eleanor hadn't spoken in 4 days. Her eyes had stopped opening. Her hands lay still on the blanket. The morphine had dulled everything, except the soft sound of the oxygen machine pulsing in rhythm, like a distant tide. Her family came and went in shifts, reading aloud, holding her hand, crying quietly in corners. But Eleanor didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't squeeze back. Until Ava, her youngest granddaughter, sat beside her. Ava was 16, too young to understand death fully, but old enough to feel it pressing against the walls of the room like humidity. She didn't know what to say. So she did what Eleanor used to do for her when she was 5, afraid of thunderstorms and monsters under the bed. She sang, "You are my sunshine, my only sunshine." Her voice was small, unsteady, but clear. And when she reached the second verse, something changed. Eleanor's breath caught, just slightly. Her lips didn't move. Her eyes stayed closed, but her throat fluttered. A single tear slipped from the corner of her eye, down across the ridge of her cheek. Ava kept singing. Not because she expected a miracle, not because she thought Eleanor would wake up and speak again, but because in that moment, she understood something that science had only recently confirmed. Her grandmother was still here, still listening, still holding on for that song. The nurse later said it was common, that sometimes the body waits for one last voice, one last memory, one final signal that it's okay to stop listening. Eleanor died an hour later, peacefully, without pain, with the echo of a child's voice still humming in the air, a lullaby coming full circle, from cradle to grave. And Ava, she still sings that song, not for comfort, but for connection, because even now she believes her grandmother still hears her. Somewhere, the science of the final ear. Hearing outlasts other senses during the dying process. Research confirms what many have intuitively known, that sound remains a final lifeline to connection. The body is shutting down, systems are closing, vision fades, touch becomes inconsistent, the sense of taste, smell, all unreliable. But one channel holds, hearing. Why? Because hearing doesn't require conscious attention. It doesn't need the eyes to track or the limbs to move. It's passive, built into the architecture of the brain's deepest layers. Primitive, resilient, enduring. Studies from hospice units and neuroscience labs agree, even when a person appears fully unresponsive, no speech, no eye movement, no gestures, their brain still reacts to sound. EEG scans show it. Faint spikes of activity, the brain processing familiar voices, music, tones, not thinking about them, not analyzing, but receiving, like a final antenna still tuned in. And it makes sense. Sound is the first sense to develop in the womb. Long before a baby sees light or breathes air, they hear. A mother's voice, the world's heartbeat, the muffled rhythms of life just outside. So maybe it's fitting that hearing is also the last to leave, the first to arrive, the last to go. And in that in-between, in that quiet final space, it becomes a kind of bridge between the person leaving and the world they're leaving behind. That's why the dying don't need lectures. They don't need explanations or advice. They need presence and words wrapped in love. Simple things, I'm here. Thank you. You mattered. Because they might not respond, but they might still be building their last memory from the sound of your voice. And that memory might just be the one they take with them. The final message. In the final hours when all that remains is hearing, our words carry the full weight of love, regret, forgiveness. This is when we say only what truly matters. There comes a moment when all the noise has stopped. The machines are quiet, the room is dim, the air feels thick, like it's holding its breath, and all that's left is you and them. They can't speak, they can't open their eyes, they can't smile or squeeze your hand. But they can still hear, and in that moment, you'll realize something most people never do in time. Words matter most when they are said last. Not the big speeches, not the eloquence, but the simple, honest fragments that only mean something because of when they are spoken. I love you. I'm sorry. You don't have to fight anymore. We're okay. You can go. These are not just comfort phrases. They are keys, unlocking peace, permission, release, and what's astonishing is how often the dying wait for them. They hold on through pain, through exhaustion, through failing organs, just for a sentence. Not because they're afraid to go, but because they need to know you're okay with them leaving. Because this isn't just their death, it's your goodbye. And it will echo in you for the rest of your life. So speak it now, before silence takes the room completely. Even if you're afraid, even if you were never close, even if your relationship was complicated or broken. Because this is the sacred closing of a story. And like all great stories, it deserves an ending with truth. One sentence, one breath. That's all it takes. The final message is not a performance. It's a surrender. And when they hear it, not with their ears, but with whatever remains just beneath the surface, you may feel something shift, a softening, a pause, a peace. And when they go, if they go, let it be with your voice as the last thing they carried. Now that you've heard all 5 signs, you can't pretend you haven't. You know what to look for. You've seen the signals. You've felt the hush that comes before the end. So the question is no longer, what if I die? The question is, how will I live now that I know? Will you keep arguing over nothing, postponing the call, sleeping next to someone you haven't spoken to in days, letting bitterness rot in your chest like old fruit? Or will you start saying what matters today? Because if sleep breaks, if hunger disappears, if the mind turns inward, if the hands grow cold, if the breath begins to falter, you won't have time to figure it out then. You have time now, and that's the mercy most people never realize. Death is not cruel, it's just on schedule. It doesn't wait for us to be ready, but it does sometimes give us hints. So listen, watch, say the thing, forgive the thing, love the person, live the hour, and when your moment comes, because it will, let it find you not in fear, but in clarity. The Stoics didn't teach us how to avoid death. They taught us how to meet it with our eyes open and our soul clean. So live like someone who has already heard the signs, because now you have. And when the time comes, you won't need to run. You'll just need to whisper, I'm ready. True Stoic way. Subscribe for more clarity, not comfort.